Hey everyone, I might have been loud, sorry. Today for another vlog. Today I want to talk about this following prompt. Who enforces the societal program? So the start of this prompt is from me just being on the internet and I saw the following sentence. I'm not sure of the full sentence, but it was something like, everyone thought I was crazy for making that decision. And it just got me thinking about like, who is this everyone that he mentions in the sentence? Like, who is the one that seems to enforce the societal program. What are the things that are normal and so on. Because in my experience, this word everyone is it's way overblown. Like obviously, if you want to take it literally, you don't know everyone. You don't even know close to everyone on Earth, right? So on a literal sense, it's obviously it's true that everyone thought you were crazy or something. But I feel like it's kind of important to be specific. Just to throw another example of the importance of being specific, it's like when people say like I failed so many times at this, like when you actually look back at how many times you failed at doing something, it's probably like 3 to 5 times. Honestly, like it's probably not that many times of trying different things, right? Not trying the same thing, but trying different things. But okay, that's just another example. I haven't really thought about it in depth, but to come back on the thing of everyone, um, I feel like this whole everyone is probably just referring to a few people and a few laughters that you got. Like probably like maybe like your family or some of your coworkers. But like if you actually counted the number of people that in this case thought you were crazy for making a decision, it would probably be like 10. It would probably be like 10 or maybe like 5 or like it's not a lot when you actually sit down and think about the number and think about the people. And yet it feels like the world is against you. So I think it's kind of worth making explicit that it's kind of like this spotlight effect in our life where we kind of tend to think of ourselves as, even though we might not admit it, but the way we might think of our life is kind of like we're the center of everything. And if people make fun of us, then it's like disaster. It's like the main character is doing poorly or something. I mean, yeah, it's called the spotlight effect from what I remember. And so yeah, basically what I said, it feeling like you're just the center of the universe, and when everyone's talking bad about you, it feels like the entire world is against you, even though it's probably like I don't know a few people at most who actually cared. Most people they just gossip and then they move on. So yeah, so the reason why it's important is not just in this specific case. It's more generally about the societal program. Who are the people who enforce the societal program? Um, And in my experience, the societal program is mainly enforced by ourselves. It's mainly an inner coercion. It's not actually external. Because as I've said, there are not that many people who actually care about you and the life you lead. Like they might laugh a bit at some of the weird decisions you make and they might feel uncomfortable, but they don't really care, right? I mean, they would probably just forget and move on to their life and distractions when they go home or something. So in my experience, the main person that maintains the societal program is yourself. So if you wonder what I mean by societal program, by the way, I wrote a blog post about it because I think the writing is most easier to fix my ideas. And there was also a great video by Noah Elkrief about societal programs that hijack your life. But basically, it's everything related to how you should live, what is normal. Basically, anything that is related to what is normal. And the idea that what is normal is also what's good. Like everything related to like work, productivity. Like productivity is good. You should work really hard. You should buy a house. You should buy a car. Even if you buy them on credit, it's fine. You need to get married. You need to have a relationship, because otherwise you'll be lonely. Otherwise you're a loser and all that. Right? And not just the idea of normalcy, but always this idea of like the next level, right? Like Noah mentions this a lot, but I think it's really a good point. Is that society always gives you that you should always go for the next level. Like, if you don't have a car, then that's your next level. If you don't have a relationship, then that's your next level. You need to move on further and further. Like the illusion of progressing, even though your life is not really, even though, just because you get those things, that doesn't mean that you actually want them, right? So it's like the illusion of improvement. Uh, in a system that you didn't decide what you want instead of so on. So other parts of the societal programs, like entertainment, right? Like when you're done with work, then the thing to do is obviously to entertain yourself. But the thing about entertainment is that it's called entertainment, but it's actually not always entertaining. Like it is worth tracking like how much you actually enjoy the entertainment, or if it's just a distraction. Like for example, for me, video games lately have felt incredibly tedious, and they basically feel like work version 2.0. Like video games don't feel like entertainment to me, or like a lot of YouTube videos, they don't feel entertaining to me. They just feel like a way to fill time and so on. Or like this idea of holidays. Holidays are a way to escape from your life. Why do you need to escape from your life in the first place? Don't ask that. Just holidays are obviously the right thing to do and so on. This is the societal program. So how you should manage your emotions, right? Like some emotions are bad. Being sad is bad. You should always be happy. Technology is good. It's progress. Again, the idea of progress, so on. So that's the societal program. I don't really want to go in depth in it. I feel like I wrote enough on the blog posts, and the video I mentioned is also really quite good. So to come back on the main idea, I think the main actor of enforcing the societal program is actually ourselves. It's ourselves in response to the childhood trauma. So the way it starts is indeed external. So it starts from school and the trauma it incurs onto you, or your family as well. It can also be a huge source of trauma. And basically what trauma causes is it makes you feel unsafe for being different, for not being in line with the rules and the societal program, basically. So this is, but what maintains the societal program when you're an adult, when you're no longer in school, it's actually not the external. It's actually your own internalized trauma, in my experience. The external thing, when you get as an adult, it becomes really weak. Like, people don't really try to like enforce you to do things, in my opinion, in my experience. But one thing for sure is that you probably have a lot of trauma from school and all that. And I might need to make an entire thing about trauma, but like trauma is not limited to things that happen to extreme cases, or like abuse, or going to war, and being sexually abused and all that. Those things are certainly traumatizing. Of course, they are very traumatizing. But trauma is more like way more general. It has to do with a response to being overwhelmed that you don't know how to express as a younger self, and that you just bury within yourself, so to speak. Like I think it's a good metaphor. I don't think it's like 100% accurate, but I think it's a good metaphor that you basically bury trauma in your body. Like you don't express the response of trauma. So typical responses are fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So fight and flight are well known, right? So you get angry and you try to fight your threat, or flight means that you run away from it. Freeze means that you, well, as you say, freeze, you just stop, and you kind of become apathetic, and you kind of don't want to like work anymore, or like be alive and that kind of stuff. And fawn means like trying to let's say become friends with your threat. This is a terrible explanation of trauma. I really need to make a proper thing about it, but like trauma is it's so ubiquitous that it's kind of hard to like pinpoint it exactly. Like it's kind of hard for me to imagine anyone comes from childhood and who is not traumatized, actually, because trauma is basically how the societal program is enforced. It's much more effective than words, right? Because you can question words, but when you have like a super, like when you try to do something different and you feel like a lot of tension in your body, you're less likely to like question it, right? Whereas words, it's a lot easier to like question words when they're explicit. Whereas trauma is completely implicit. It's within you, right? It's literally within you. So I think this is why trauma is such a powerful tool for the societal program to be enforced. Is that it's implicit and it's within you, and obviously the best thing about trauma, I mean, from society's perspective, is that no one knows about. I mean, very few people actually know what trauma is. Like they just are completely unconscious, and they just run the societal program completely unconsciously. They're not aware that their life is directed by trauma. But let me give a few examples of what I just said, so to make it more explicit. So a lot of what people call social anxiety nowadays, I fully believe is just trauma. It's simply trauma from being rejected so much in childhood, or like not being, not, how to say, like being rejected out in the playground and all that, and maybe perhaps by your parents being fairly cold to you and never uh, being with you emotionally and all that. Maybe they just like give you like a phone for you to distract yourself, and that's how they show quote unquote affection. But all of this, all of these rejections as a child, they don't go away, and I fully believe that the reason a lot of people are socially anxious is because they're just afraid of human beings. They don't have a good they don't have a good history of them, and they've learned that human beings can be incredibly nasty, so they just stay away from them. This is not so much to do with societal program, but it has more to do with trauma, right? But an example of societal program would be the coercion that happens around like alcohol or something, like I mean, I personally don't drink alcohol, but I certainly have felt a lot of pressure to drink alcohol because it's quote unquote the normal thing, right? Like, everyone does it, and I don't like alcohol personally. I don't like the taste, and I don't see why I would want to drink it. I don't see how it would add anything to my life, but there's a it's not just an idea that alcohol is the normal things. Like people are genuinely trying to coerce you into drinking it through group pressure, peer pressure, and yeah, it's a very visceral thing, right? The discomfort of going against people. It doesn't take a lot of people for you to start feeling uncomfortable. Like it could just be like 2 or 3 people, which in the grand scheme of things is not a lot, but it's again on the idea of everyone. It's not like everyone is trying to coerce you into drinking alcohol, but 2 or 3 people, it's quite a lot of, it's quite a lot to say no to, when you're just alone by yourself. And yeah, like, and another form of trauma has to do with like how we are forced to do work that we don't care about or that we don't want to do through school. That's basically everything related to school. Is that I seriously doubt that a lot of it comes from great joy. It's just forced onto you. It's forced onto you so much, right? Like, how many years did I go to school? It's like 6 years. It's like 12, 17, 20 years of my life. Because there were 3 years before primary school, then there were 6 years in primary school, 6 years in secondary school. At the end of primary school, you're 12. At the end of secondary school, you're 18. Then 5 years of university. So that's 20 years of school. That's a lot of fucking coercion. A lot of doing something you don't want. Obviously, it could it's impossible to imagine that this wouldn't go away. That this would go away, but like this doesn't just go away within your system. If you had to coerce yourself for 20 years, or you have to be coerced into doing something for 20 years, you will definitely feel it in your system, in your body. In the fact that now you start coercing yourself to do things you don't want to do in general. So I feel like that's kind of how coercion starts. Self-coercion starts. Is that it starts with school. That you internalize the idea that it's okay to do things you don't want to do. You internalize that idea, and so that ends up becoming your life. Because as a child, you didn't have a choice. Right? Like, as a child, you really didn't have a choice. You couldn't survive by yourself, and you didn't know any better. But as an adult, you certainly have a choice, and you certainly know better. And that's the whole thing about trauma. Trauma is like the inner child, or like the past self that hasn't been updated, so to speak. Like you're still running your child program without having internalized the fact that you're now an adult who can like defend himself, speak up, say no, and so on. Yeah, saying no is a good example as well. The people who cannot say no are also I also would say they are very much traumatized into this, because when you're a child, you can't say no. If an adult tells you to do something, you just have to do it. So you internalize the structure of like, my needs are not as important as what someone else might want for me. And so I think a lot of people who are people pleasers, they say, who can't say no, they're very clearly traumatized. And this would be like in the trauma model of the 4F responses, this would be fawn. There's a lot of fawning in society. Fawning is like, as I've said, when you're trying to become friend with your oppressor, trying to like, yes, fawn is incredibly present in our present world because like we're not really allowed to like fight or run away or freeze. It's like often the best way is to just put on a smile and put on a mask. It's kind of like what fawning looks like in our modern society. It's like, yeah, being a people pleaser, kissing people's asses and all that, laughing when you don't really find the joke funny and so on. So, hope those were enough examples to like get a vague idea or a rough idea of what I mean by how the societal program is enforced by trauma. And I think, yeah, trauma is really, really the main one. Another way the societal program is enforced is by sheer unconsciousness, right? Like when people are distracted all the time, they cannot reflect on their life. They cannot reflect on what they want. They cannot reflect on the dissatisfaction with life and so on. So they just keep doing it, right? Like it's really easy to maintain a societal program when you have someone who's unconscious. Maintaining that with a conscious human being who evaluates his life every day is pretty much impossible, right? Because they will just they will just come to the conclusion that they are not happy with their lives and so on. But with like unconscious people, it's very easy. So distraction becomes a huge form of like the way the societal program is enforced, and it's like indirectly, right? Like sometimes it is directly, I guess. Through like propaganda and all that, like in the media, especially because I know there's a lot of media pretty propagandized. A lot of stories are they feel more like propaganda than like someone trying to express something about the world. But yeah, and I think more often than not, it's more like indirect, right? In the sense that you become so unconscious when you engage yourself in quote unquote entertainment or distraction that you indirectly maintain the societal program because you're not looking at it. So yeah, so I think so what I've listed so far is like trauma is the main one. The second main one is like unconsciousness, for example, distraction. The third one is propaganda. Although I don't really know a lot about it. I mean, I don't really spend too much time nowadays on it, but it's definitely there. Now that I think about it, it's definitely a pretty huge factor of it. Like propaganda, social media, people putting on signals and all that. Like that definitely affects you. Right? So yeah, for sure. Uh, yeah, I think I would say that's those are the main ones. Right? How the SNAP program is enforced. It's mainly internal, right? It's mainly things that you can control. Actually, like you can heal your trauma, you can become more conscious and make the societal program explicit and trying to remove the beliefs. It's not easy work for sure. Like, I'm not saying that inner work is easy, but the fact that it's inner means that you're fully in control. Like it's not easy, but at least you're fully in control, and that makes a huge difference. And the third one, propaganda. Yeah, you can also. I mean, I think the best way would be to just kill out the internet, the sources of the internet that are propagandized, which is basically everything nowadays. I mean, it's kind of sad, but that's kind of how it is. But for example, like music is not necessarily propaganda, right? So it's not as bad as you might think on the first listen, because yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are not propagandized. It is worth seeing what the sources are. Like the news are pretty much all propaganda nowadays. I think they kind of were in the past as well, but nowadays it's incredibly apparent. A lot of stories are a lot of things related to like culture, like video game culture as well. I feel like it's pretty propaganda because not in the sense that like trying to enforce any political beliefs. But when I mean propaganda, it's not necessarily political beliefs. When I mean propaganda, it's more like enforcing a program that you didn't agree on, and that is implicit rather than explicit, right? So for example, like video game culture always has this backbone of like, this is just what humans do, and that's just what humans do, is that they entertain themselves when they don't have anything else to do. You know, like boredom is like the worst thing that could happen to a human being, so you need to play as many video games as possible, because otherwise you'll be bored, and boredom is like the worst thing. Boredom is basically death. This is how it feels like in the video game culture sometimes. It's like it feels like they're deathly afraid of boredom. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, this is what I mean by propaganda. It's like it's not necessarily political. It's most propaganda is not political, I would say, although there certainly is a lot of political propaganda nowadays. But yeah, I think the political propaganda is more it's more apparent, I would say. Although I don't know, I've never really cared about politics, so I just run away from those as much as I can. So yeah, I think I've said about everything I've had to say. Like, you know, so to summarize, the main three main ways I think the social programs enforce this, which are all internal as an adult, but they didn't start as internal. At first they were external, but then they became internal. Is trauma, unconsciousness, and the external propaganda. But I think the internal ones are much more powerful forces than the external ones. But the external ones, the external ones should certainly be addressed, but that's up to you to decide. So yeah, I said pretty much everything I had to say. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.